All right, Valerie, thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Hi, thanks so much, Alexander, for having me. I'm
You're
so
the
happy to be
you're the
here.
closest guest that hasn't came in. You're a couple hours north. I've spent plenty of time in that Akron, Canton, Worcester area, so I know where you're at, and I appreciate you joining us. So, Valerie, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to the last couple of years?
Yeah, so I'm an anxious attachment specialist and trauma informed somatic coach. So I help people heal their anxious attachment so that they can be a match for healthy, secure love, so they can feel confident in their bodies, confident in dating, and just like really reduce anxiety and feel safe in their body.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. What is an attachment style? What are the attachment styles? Can you define those for us? Because some people don't even know what that is, and they have no idea what you just said.
You got it. So we all have an attachment style, how we have connected to our parents. So I'll just kind of go over each of the attachment styles. Does that sound good?
Be helpful, yeah.
Awesome. So this is what a lot of people come to me for. They want to feel securely attached. What does this mean? This means that as a child, your caregivers were regulated and consistently met your needs. They were attuned to you. You feel now as an adult, you feel safe to be vulnerable and close with people and can also tolerate when there's space since you know how to self-regulate because that's what was modeled to you. You're able to handle and respond to problems and, repair conflict in a healthy way, and then your main nervous system state is regulation, is calmness, is feeling safe. So, what I specialize in is helping people heal their anxious attachment or anxious preoccupied. What does this mean? This means that as a child, your parents couldn't consistently meet your needs or they inconsistently met your needs. Maybe you had a caregiver who was emotionally unavailable. So now as an adult, you become hyper attuned and hyper vigilant to your parents' needs or your partner's needs, and you go into people pleasing mode to make sure they will meet your needs. And this survival response is really highly linked with codependency. I like to define codependency as if you're safe, then I'm safe. And your sense of safety becomes externalized, meaning you find safety in others. Maybe you find safety in your job because you don't feel it within yourself. And this causes a really deep fear of abandonment. And this person's main state that they're usually in is fight or flight. They're really anxious. So your attachment style is really impacted also by your nervous system and how you feel on a day-to-day basis. So people with an anxious attachment feel mostly in fight or flight a lot of the time, and then someone who's securely attached will feel calm. And then there are two other different types of avoidant attachment styles. So one is dismissive avoidant. This is your typical F boys. This is people who maybe are narcissists, and they how they grew up is their caregivers were dismissive, cold, or were not emotionally available to your bids for connection. Meaning, if you are wanting a hug, they would ignore you or neglect you. And the child interprets this as rejection. It learns to suppress their needs and become hyper independent, where closeness and asking for help, they start to associate that with pain. And since no one was there for them when they were stressed or dysregulated, they feel in shutdown all the time because their feelings and needs get numbed out, they dissociate from them. Their main nervous system state is they feel shut down.
Hmm.
So that's dismissive avoidant. And then fearful avoidant, how this can show up is parents were sometimes the source of danger and sometimes safety. Maybe because your parent had a personality disorder, maybe they were narcissistic, or they were an addict or were an alcoholic. This unpredictability causes, this person to want closeness, but also fearing it at the same time because it wasn't safe. So, this is what causes that push pull dynamic in dating. And then also, this person registers love as chaos. Anything stable will feel boring. And their main nervous
Mm.
system state is freeze and feeling depressed. So that's really what attachment styles are, the differences, and how to really see what yours are.
Okay, maybe give me some examples through we can use the lens of dating because I think that's probably where this idea has become the most popular. Not to say that it doesn't come up in family relationships and friend relationships and also even potentially business, but um, maybe start with secure and then work your way down.
Yes. So, kind of how this would look like day to day is you feel regulated. You know that your needs are going to be met. You feel safe to open up to your partner. You feel
Mm,
safe to share your truth. You feel safe to share if they hurt you. And if they
mm,
ask for space, you don't take it personally. If they don't text you all day, you don't take it personally. And you're like, well, they're at work. They might not have the capacity. Whatever is the reason, I'm okay regardless. And so they're also able to healthily communicate their needs and healthily communicate when there's conflict. So ultimately, they aren't feeling anxious all the time. They're feeling calm, they're feeling regulated. And with business, this might show up as you feel safe in your business. You know that money is always coming in. If your business partner and you have an argument, you never sweep things under the rug. You share things that's on your mind and your heart, and you feel safe to communicate those things and share boundaries. You respect their boundaries. So that's really how it shows up in dating or in business.
so those people are going to have open lines of communication. They're going to be able to communicate. I think maybe a simple summary is you're able to communicate difficult things with each other relatively easily, and neither partner or business associate is going to freak out when you say, "Hey, Valerie, you weren't here today. We expected you. We needed you. That was kind of a letdown." And you go, "Well, you're overworking me," and you kind of freak
Mhm.
out and panic instead of just going, "Okay, I'm receiving that. Maybe I feel a certain way, but I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to say, okay, well, I
Mhm.
understand where you come from with that, but da 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 da."
Exactly. You're right on the mark there.
All right, then your favorite then, anxious attachment.
You got it. So, how anxious attachment will really look like in dating starting out is they will start to feel so anxious. They'll feel that fear of abandonment as soon as someone, maybe if they don't text for a few hours, you think,
Mm,
where are they? What happened? Did they die? Are they okay? This person who's anxiously attached, they might call many times. They worry a lot in their relationship. They feel they're always on the edge of their seat if they will be abandoned because they're hyper attuned. These people please. They'll put their partner's needs over their own. They may also, they're just always wanting validation because they don't feel good enough within themselves. And then in business, this might show up as, feeling anxious all the time. You're feeling always in fight or flight. You're always feeling like, when is my next customer going to go in? You're not going to trust that when customers say that they're going to buy, they don't. You don't trust their word. um, you might attack people if they don't want to buy from you, or you
mm.
might think something's wrong with me. What's wrong with my business? Why aren't you buying from me? Instead of realizing maybe it's just not the right time for them because they don't have the money, etc.
Yeah, and what would be some typical behavior type patterns you're gonna see people who are anxious engage in? I know you said texting, potentially like texting over and over and over again, calling over and over again. Those are kind of the funny ones that we all know about, where it's like you see the internet gif or meme of someone who's sent like 50 text messages, and the person's like, "I'm sorry, I was taking a shower," or whatever it is.
Yeah. So, some other ways that it shows up, I would say, is really putting others' needs before your own,
Mm,
abandoning yourself. How you really do that is maybe your partner wants to talk to you, but you had a workout planned. And instead of going to your workout, you talk to them instead because you're abandoning your own needs. Or you might
mm,
have worked a 12-hour shift or you worked hard on your business, but then they asked you to cook them dinner and you have a hard time saying no because your worth comes from how others see you. So instead of resting and taking a nap or going to sleep, taking care of yourself, you'll take care of them because you find that your worth is found through others because you don't have that within. This could be like always wanting reassurance, nitpicking your partner, just
mm.
always finding something wrong with your partner.
Interesting. Finding something wrong with your partner. I would have thought that would maybe be a little more on the avoidant side of things, where almost like you're looking for reasons to leave.
That's also a huge avoidant one. But yeah, anxious attachment, they'll be hyper attuned to problems and they'll worry all the time about their
I
relationship.
see. I see. So if I say, "Oh, okay, I'll see you later," you'll dwell on that and be like, "He didn't say that he missed me," or "He didn't say that he loves me," or "He didn't say he's
Yes,
excited to see me later. He just said he would see me later."
exactly. You're right on the money.
And then they'll stew on that idea for hours and hours and then
Mhm.
send some crazy text, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but it like attachment styles, they're on a spectrum. So someone might be somewhat securely attached and somewhat anxious. So they could be maybe they'll call a few times, but maybe not like 50 times like other people talk about.
Mhm. Yeah, I think this is an important time to say that presumably people have some characteristics of all of these at
Mhm.
some capacity.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah,
someone can be
absolutely.
somewhat secure, but then maybe a little bit avoidant or a little bit anxious.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and as far as the anxious one goes, in business, I see this a lot, specifically from employees, where they're very worried about the validation from the rest of their team members, or they're very worried about the validation from upper management. And
Mhm.
sometimes if they don't get that, or if they feel like the conversation was slightly difficult in their direction, like a manager has to correct a behavior, they'll get very like defensive and snappy
Mhm.
and maybe even uh like start to push back in the other way. Like, well, yeah, you always do this. And it's like, whoa, like where is this coming from? Um,
Mhm.
that's one that I see pop up a lot where employees find it difficult to receive feedback because they feel as if they're very anxious and they're getting attacked and they're going to be fired any day of the week here soon.
Absolutely, because people with an anxious attachment, they probably put their work needs above their own. You know,
Mm,
they'll work through lunch, they'll people please, do everything they possibly can to get a project done, and they're very sensitive to criticism. So to them, it feels like their boss is attacking their self-worth because a lot of
mm,
the times people with an anxious attachment, they start to associate their worth with their job or their achievements because they don't feel that worth from within because their parent never reinforced positive qualities about them, only the negative ones, or they were emotionally unavailable. So then we start to make these stories about ourselves when we're young that we're not good enough because we don't have access to that logical part. So, what happens in adulthood is they just start to feel very triggered as soon as someone gives them constructive criticism, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and I'm just reading right now, and I've heard different ratios thrown out, but this says, according to research, the ideal praise to criticism ratio is 5 to 1. Essentially, people will dwell on negative feedback and they'll keep
Mhm.
playing that over in their mind. And even if I tell you, like, "Yeah, Valerie, you're working great. We really appreciate you." But next day, if I say, like, again, "Valerie, we really needed you in the office and you missed that day," you're going to dwell on that. Even though I've given you one positive comment and one negative, it would take five positive comments to sort of override that one negative comment because we just have a negativity bias as human beings. We remember the negative things that happened to us. We remember those embarrassing things that happened when we were kids. We don't like hardly remember much about some random soccer game that we won and scored a goal in.
You got it right 100%. And like you might tell your employee, "Oh, you're doing so great. You're doing all the right things. This is so fabulous." But then it still will never be enough for someone who's anxiously attached.
Yeah, I had a business partner, a former business partner, who would no, he's a fine guy. It just didn't work out. That happens in
Uh-huh.
relationships, that happens in business. Don't
Totally.
don't enter into a business partnership unless you're prepared for it to not potentially work, just like a relationship, right? Um,
Mhm.
and he would always say, I don't want to change myself to deal with these people. And now we have 30 employees. I'm like, that's business. Like that is being a
Yeah.
manager is changing yourself because to your point, some people will be anxious, some people will be secure, some people will be able to take feedback and criticism. Some people won't be able to take even the like most gentle criticism. They'll break out in tears and have to leave the building. Some people will be really avoidant. You'll say one bad thing and they'll be like, whatever, I'm gonna quit. I don't even care about this job.
Mhm.
You're like,
Mhm.
hey, like we like you working here. I want to
Mhm.
let you know that, but I do need to like just let you know this thing.
Absolutely. Someone who's avoidant will run away from their problems versus someone who's anxious will try and run towards them and try and fix it.
Interesting. So talk to me about how avoidant behavior is gonna manifest in relationships then.
Yes. So I'll just share. Why don't I just share from my personal
Yeah.
experience? One of the guys that I dated, everything was great the first few months. We were close. He masqueraded himself as secure. And then as time went on, he would need more and more space from me. He would want to just not talk about the important things. He would avoid the important things that need the conversations needed to be had. It would just like he just wanted to pull away, and people who are avoidantly attached feel suffocated by closeness, and they hate when people are depending on them, because as human beings we're wired for connection, but people who are avoidantly attached will suppress that need for that attachment.
They'll suppress it in themselves?
Yes, yes.
So then that person you said won't talk about the hard conversations, potentially they won't spend a lot of time with you, or they'll spend minimal amounts of time with you?
Yes, 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 because to them, it feels suffocating. They feel like they don't wanna get too close, because if you're too close to me, that feels dangerous, because their parents weren't that to them. They didn't model that. So if someone secure comes in, to them, it's gonna feel very unfamiliar, and they're gonna wanna self-sabotage it.
Mm,
Because our nervous system, if you're avoidantly attached or even anxiously attached, you start to associate stress with love, and stress and rejection with love, ultimately, because that's what
mm.
your parents modeled you.
So where is the line between I like alone time and I'm avoidant? Because I'm thinking about myself. Like I know some of my friends, they'll get into a relationship and they'll see this person like 5 or 6 days a week. One of my friends was like,
Oh.
"Oh, when you were dating your girlfriend, how many days a week would you see each other?" I'd be like, I don't two. And they're like, "Oh, we would spend every night together." And I would be like, "Oh my gosh, like that does sound kind of suffocating." I do like my alone time. I like to be on my own. Um, where is the line between I'm slightly avoidant or maybe very avoidant and I just do legitimately need time alone?
Mm. I'll share this. So I feel like I'm definitely way more securely attached. And for me, I run a business, I run a company, I'm on two dance teams, I'm a therapist, I'm doing all these things. So for me, I'm a busy person and I live a very fulfilled life. And for me, usually it feels best for me to spend time with someone 1 to 2 times a week, compared to 5 to 6 days a week could feel overwhelming if you're spending all day together or all evening together. Like, I think there is a big difference. And especially, there's just like attachment styles, there's also a spectrum of extroversion and introverted. Like, you just might need more alone time to recharge, especially if you're someone who is doing a business like this where you're talking to people all day, every day. So I think it just depends. I think if you are wanting to avoid relationships altogether and you just don't want to get into relationships at all, or you avoid it, I would say that's avoidant, compared to, okay, I want to be in a relationship, I want to commit to you, but maybe spending every single day with you might be too much for me.
So would a person who's avoidant sort of self-sabotage by just maybe like not responding to someone or not like engaging in their requests to get together? Or what would be some
Mhm.
of the other behavior patterns that someone who's avoidant would engage in? Potentially even like seeking out different partners at the same time?
Mhm. Yeah, so I would say that as you get more and more close, that's when they want to pull away even more. So,
Mm,
an example of mine is a partner of mine. We were getting close to moving in together. And as we got closer and closer, like, I remember him saying, "Oh, I'm going to get you a nightstand because this is getting more serious, like for my bedroom." And then a few weeks later, we broke up. He just said, we just have different needs, and they'll self-sabotage that way, and they'll find faults in their partner. It's
mm,
it I don't want to take that into like, oh, you can find faults and be avoidant, but anyone can find a fault in their partner.
mhm.
But avoidantly attached people will find faults and maximize them in their mind. They'll catastrophize them. Yeah, they'll pull away. Like if they have a hard time, if they're feeling depressed, they won't reach out for help, or they'll ignore you and just ghost for a few days or more potentially. And yeah, they'll tell you a certain date of when they want to meet you, then they don't show up or they don't follow through. Those are some other ways that the behavior can manifest.
So, how much do you think that the culture right now is sort of playing into that avoidant nature, right? We all know about the ick. You catch the ick. I have caught the ick myself, so I'm not immune to it. I have some silly ones that I'm like thinking about myself like, is that like a logical reason to like move on past this person? This one girl didn't want to put mashed potatoes in the refrigerator overnight. I was like, you have to put these in the refrigerator. These will go bad. And she's like, it'll be fine. I was like, let's just put them into the refrigerator. This is a simple solution. And she was like, no, it's fine. I'm going to eat them for breakfast tomorrow. And I was like, I can't live with this person. There's no possible way. This person's crazy. Um, so like again, how much is the culture playing into this ick thing? And then we can get into the dating apps and how fast things churn in the dating market now. But maybe give your
Mhm.
2 cents on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think culture and dating apps go hand in hand. Like I was talking about this with my physical therapist around like dating, and she's like, what? She's like 56. She's like, when I was dating, every week we would go and dance every single week. Every week I would also throw darts. Now, especially since COVID, people are all working online, they're working from home. So you're not really out in the wild, so to speak. You're not really talking to new people. You're either meeting from friends or friends, or you're meeting on dating apps. So I think dating apps can make you feel like people around you are more disposable, or you can get new
For sure.
people easier. So maybe you might not put in as much effort because you feel like the grass is greener somewhere else. When in reality, maybe you just need to put in the extra effort. But also, I want to share, Alexander, like that would be a big ick for me if someone's like, I don't want to put my mashed potatoes in the fridge. Like, what if it has like cheese or butter or sour cream or something? Like, I don't know. That's a no no for me.
I thought that it was ridiculous. But maybe I have more ridiculous ones that I could think of if I really thought. But I think to your point with the dating apps thing, an important element is that if I choose not to, I don't ever have to see this person again. So I don't necessarily
Mm,
need to like keep it that cordial with them or even be like generally polite. So you can just like stop responding to this person and I will never see them again. Whereas if you and me see each other, but we're in like a friend group that's mutual, if you see me again, you're like, hey, why
what the
didn't you
fuck?
call why didn't you call me? Why didn't you text me? What was that all about? You're telling your other friend, like, Alex is being weird. And you had a certain level of like communal pride in you had a reputation. That's probably the simplest way to put it. When there was 700 people living in the town, you had a reputation that you wanted to be generally nice to everyone. Now it doesn't really matter. And there's that paradox of choice where, when she was dating your 56-year-old PT, if she found a baseball fan and she was a baseball fan, she'd be like, this is great. Now the joke is like, well, they're a Red Sox fan. Screw them. It's like, no, you have so much in common. You just like are overlooking that because you feel really confident you can find a Yankees fan instead of a Red Sox fan.
Mhm. Absolutely. Like back then, it's like more of that reputation and also like accountability. Like if you're dating someone in your friend group and if you're not treating them with kindness or respect or consistency, your friend would probably be like, what the F, Alex? Like, why aren't you talking to Valerie? Like, what's up with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with dating apps now, people can ghost people. I mean, you could always ghost even back then, even in my physical therapist dating aspect, but it wasn't as common. And she also mentioned like people then, they weren't texting. It was like if you have a phone call with them, you're like scheduling that in.
Yeah.
So it's more like scarce, almost like that scarcity mindset too.
Well, what's even crazier is if you said, I have a date, we're going to go on a date May 18th at 7 p.m. at the Old Town Inn, you just had to show up. Like you didn't have
Mhm.
like, a way to be like, hey, I'm running late. You just had to go and hope that they were going to be there. And if they got a flat tire, you're like, well, that's hilarious, right? You got stood up on the date. It's like, No, she legitimately got a flat tire and she couldn't call you because she didn't have a
Mhm.
phone with her.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So you talked about childhood a lot, and I just want to kind of drill into that because so for me, I felt like I had a pretty good childhood. I've talked about it on this podcast before. My parents, I think, were awesome. They were super loving. They tried their hardest. I'm not saying they were perfect at every avenue, but they definitely didn't screw us up royally along the way. So when I hear that it's a lot of childhood related, I'm like, well, I don't know. Is it? How much do you think childhood plays into it? And what would you say to someone who goes, I'm either anxious or avoidant or what, but my parents were fantastic. There's no way my childhood was a cause of that.
So it could be two things. Like there are something called big T traumas and little T traumas.
Yep.
So a little T trauma can affect your nervous system and affect your sense of self just as much as a big T trauma, depending on how sensitive you are as a person. So an example of a little T trauma could be your father is giving your sister a balloon and not you. And you start to internalize the belief that I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy of love. That's why he's not giving me a balloon. And then if that behavior and that belief goes unchecked, unnoticed, then you're going into relationships looking out into the world. How am I not good enough? And then you attract people who reflect that belief back to you. And then also, with it could also impact your attachment style if you have like an early on high school relationship or maybe a middle school relationship where that was your first love, you dated for years, or your one of your first experiences and it wasn't healthy. That could also really impact your attachment style as well.
Mm. So do you feel like it has to be related to a younger age? What if, I'm 32? What if I had a breakup today that was like really devastating for me? Is that something that could rewire the way I'm going to behave in relationships?
It could, depending on, like I said earlier, like depending on how sensitive you are. But if you are, say, a securely attached person and then you go through a really devastating breakup, you'll have different beliefs around it. You'll have beliefs that, I'm good enough. I'm going to get someone who treats me wonderfully. I know that I deserve better. This must have just not worked out because we're just incompatible. Not that I'm not good enough or I'm unworthy. So that would be the differences there.
Interesting. So, talk to me about attachment styles in men versus women. What do you see being different between the sexes there?
So I would say, honestly, like this could be clouded from my own experience. Some men can, like, I feel like a lot of men can be avoidant and women lean more towards anxious, but that's not always true. Like, there are so many men who are anxious, so many men who are secure, and also many women who are also avoidant or fearful avoidant. I think it just depends on your childhood, your relationships, what beliefs you have about yourself. So it's kind of hard to say because everyone is different. And I don't know if there's as much of a gender gap there, if that makes sense.
I I would have said what you said also is that men, I would say, we're generalizing everybody, and this is bro science. I would say men tend to be more avoidant in nature,
Mm-hmm,
and I
mm-hmm,
have seen that women tend to be more anxious attached in nature.
mm-hmm. Because with men, there's so much conditioning and programming around what it means to be a man. It's weak if you show emotions. And a lot of men just haven't learned how to process their emotions. So their prominent state is anger because that's the only state that was validated or they felt safe with, or else maybe they were shamed for their emotions. And women can be shamed for their emotions as well, don't get me wrong. But with men, it's very cultural, especially for African American men or Latino men. They are so taught that men should not be weak by showing any emotion or crying.
Hmm. Yeah, I would say I've had both genders cry in my office, but more often would be women. And then when a guy does cry, he's like really trying to cover it up or like make
Mm-hmm.
sure that nobody else sees and like don't tell anybody else about this. Um, and yeah, to your point, I think that is conditioned. I think men sort of been told and taught and um, seem to take benefit when they can be a little more stoic in nature. I mean,
Mhm,
that has been my experience in business too. Like, as a
mhm,
business owner, you don't want to be crazy emotional. And I actually feel like
mhm,
it's worked both ways on me, that I have
mhm,
learned to become less emotional while in business, but also
mhm.
just doing this for a decade. This September will be 10 years in business for us. There's
Wow.
nothing that happens where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is chaos. I have to pull my hair out. Oh, we're gonna lose the business." It's like, "Okay, like, we've been sued before. All right, it's
Mhm,
fine. It's
mhm,
annoying, but it's okay. Someone's
mhm,
quit before. Someone screamed at me before. Someone has been
mhm,
disappointed with our level of service before. The business didn't
mhm,
come crumbling down. We just sort of
mhm,
walked it off." So I have specifically, you talk about relationships. I've had more than one female say that I'm like almost emotionless. And I'm like, well, I don't think that's true, but maybe I just don't display it in the way that you're requesting me to display it.
Tell me more about that.
I don't know. I mean, again, as stated, over the last decade, I think that I've just seen a lot of things happen
Mhm,
in the business sense. So I don't ever panic. I don't
mhm,
ever like let something really try to fluster me. And also I
mhm,
do sort of believe in the thinkers and appreciate the thinkers that say you don't want to be the person who is running around all the time and chaotic and they just can't
mhm,
control themselves. You want to be the smartest, most calm person in the room who still gets the job done. And
mhm,
that's something that I also believe in is if you
mhm,
stay calm, if you think things through, and I'm very logical also. Like, I'm very logical. I'm an ENTJ. Like, when
mhm,
I haven't had a lot of, success dating girls who are very emotional because I'm, like,
mhm,
very logical. I'm like, "This is not a problem. We have a flat tire. We'll call someone. Like, I'll change it. It's no big
mhm,
deal. We're gonna be late for an like, what we're gonna be an hour late. It just is what it is. It's fine."
mhm,
Whereas they might be really frustrated and flustered and emotional or crying, and I'm just like, "I don't understand your response," and they don't understand my response, where I am
mhm,
not super flustered and worried and things like
mhm,
that. So, yeah, I think that it stems from business, but it's
mhm.
it's worked on me in both directions. I've worked on it, and it's worked on me.
I hear that. Especially it's like with a business, you kind of have to learn to stay calm and regulate yourself, or else your business is just going to be a dumpster fire. And I think when you've seen it enough times, like, hey, I've been sued, this has happened, money's lower, you have to like build up that resiliency. And it sounds like you've done that. It sounds like that translated towards your relationships. Do you feel like you suppress your emotions or you just feel just more calm on a day-to-day basis?
I don't feel like I suppress them.
Mhm,
I just think that maybe my emotions aren't as strong as some other people's. And I will give one example. We can go back to relationships in a second. But I had a friend who was a gal, and she was running a dog, not dog walking business, but like a doggy daycare essentially.
mhm,
And she was just constantly stressed, and I could tell
mhm,
that she was like not avoiding the stress, she was, like, leaning into it. She kinda
uh-huh,
thought that it was, like, how she had to do it, and I was
mhm,
trying to coach her up, like, "You this is not good for your business. I know you think that
mhm,
this is the way that you have to do it, like, you have to be, like,
mhm,
hyper focused on everything, but you're a bottleneck. Like, your stress is a
mhm,
bottleneck. This is not going to be beneficial for your business long term. Maybe it can work in the short term, but it is
mhm,
not sustainable for you to be this stressed. Like, you're gonna explode, you're gonna blow up." So and
mm,
she was like, "Oh,
mhm,
I don't know, like, you seem so, like, relaxed about your business." And I'm like, "Well, no, I take it seriously, but I also
mhm.
understand it for what it is. Like, it's a business. We're selling stuff on the internet, all right? We're not curing cancer." And she's like, "Well, these people's dogs are really important." I'm like, "I agree, they're important. You wanna keep them alive." I was like, "Have you ever had a dog die on your watch?" She's like, "No." I was like, "There you go. It's never happened." Like, not to say it'll never happen, but you don't really have you don't have data to support your hypothesis. So again, I'm kind of
Mhm,
going back to that logical side where I'm like, you really don't have anything to support this possible potential future that you're drawing up in your mind. It's something that
mhm.
you're allowing to take over and it's not necessary.
I totally hear you there. And I like to use the quote, if it's hysterical, it's historical. So something about this dog business probably was triggering up something from her childhood. Any big reaction or big emotion that you may notice, it's not coming from your true adult self. It's coming from, oh, it's triggering an inner child wound. So for her, it could be like, it's just triggering this belief that I can't handle things feel too much, I'm not capable. It could be really just stirring up some of those inner child wounds. And when we're in a fight or flight state, if we're really anxious, our logical part of our brain like literally shuts off. So this
Mm.
is why you might struggle with women or people in general in your business, that you're talking about something from a logical standpoint and you're like, can't you just see it this way? But they like physically in their brain like can't.
No, and I think that is what has sort of happened whenever I've dated girls that are like very feeling type people. Like we just like don't like match because they're trying to get me to see things from their viewpoint and vice versa. I'm trying to get them to see things from my viewpoint, and we just literally cannot see through the same set of glasses sometimes. So
Mhm.
yeah, but I
Mhm.
don't think, to your point, like, I don't think that I have any childhood related I don't think I've had any, like, terrible breakups that I've said I have to suppress my emotions and I have to refuse to allow myself to lean in on these relationships and feel deeply. So that's, like, one of the questions why I asked that because I know people are gonna be out there listening and be like, "That's not me," but I might be a little avoidant. Like, okay, I could feel
Mhm.
a little bit of that maybe.
Mhm. Mhm. Totally. I completely hear you there.
I saw you talking about, the cool girl dating scene. Talk to me about the dating scene right now, what you're seeing from I think you're a little bit younger than me, so what are you seeing kinda in
Mhm.
the dating scene right now that's plaguing people?
Yeah, so this kind of goes in with avoidance, anxious attachment, all these things, the cool girl syndrome. If you've been conditioned to feel that you're not enough or you're too much, you will, or if you're anxiously attached, you learn to hyper attune to other people and suppress your needs, abandon your needs. And you do this by not sharing your desires, not sharing your boundaries, not sharing your wants. If you're listening to this, maybe you want your partner to bring you flowers every time you go on a date, but you refuse to tell him. Or you want, like, an example, like a old roommate of mine a few years ago, she was dating this guy and she was like, I really want this necklace. Should I give him a hint? Absolutely not. Tell him what you want. This is the
Mm,
cool girl syndrome. Acting like, oh, I don't care. We can do whatever you want. We can eat whatever you want. And that's not going to give you the fulfilling healthy relationship that you want, because someone who's emotionally unavailable is going to want to give you the bare minimum. They're going to give you below the bare minimum.
mm. So it's sort of the avoidant style that girls use, is to just act like, "I don't really care about this that much."
It could be a little bit of avoidance, but it also could be someone who's anxiously attached because they're fearing abandonment so much. They're like, I'll just abandon my needs. I will
Uh
try to be low maintenance, not high maintenance, so that he doesn't leave me. That's where I really think it stems from.
It's kinda like this idea of the inner citadel. It's something that you can't achieve, so you say, "It's not something that I want." Like, you see a person who's really fit, they have their shirt off, they're, like, throwing a Frisbee at the park, and you're like, "I would never wanna look like that." And it's not that you actually don't wanna look like that. If you could snap your fingers, you would totally look like that. It's just that you actually don't believe you ever could attain that. So thus you say to that person like, I don't want to look like that. I don't want to look like you. I don't want to be like you.
Mhm,
When it's sort of sour grapes essentially, where you go like,
mhm.
well, those grapes I couldn't reach them, but they were probably sour anyways.
Absolutely. Because if you believe that it's not possible for me, our subconscious mind will filter our world to look like that, and then we will act in accordance of it. So Dr. Joe Dispenza states, you can't think the same thoughts, feel the same feelings, have the same beliefs, and do the same actions and have a different reality. So it's the same with dating. If you believe that you're not worthy of love, you're not deserving of a healthy partner, if you believe that there are no good men out there, that's
Mm,
exactly what
mm,
your brain is going
mm.
to feed you and feed into your external reality, because it's focusing on that. What you focus on expands.
You've talked about dating apps a little bit. What do you think is primarily driving girls right now in that dating app market? I have my thoughts on guys. I'll give you mine, but tell me from the female perspective, what do you think's happening there? What's working? What's not working?
So I haven't been on the dating apps in a hot minute, but I am going to be going on them soon-ish. So,
Uh-oh.
because I have been single for the past, 4 or 5-ish months. I feel like what's working is I feel like if you're anxiously attached and you're listening to this, you might attach way too early. This could look like you're having just one date with someone and you're already seeing your wedding, your future children with them, and you're getting really way over your head because people who are anxiously attached are projecting their unmet needs from not feeling lovable or not feeling loved from their parents onto their partner or future
Mm,
partner. So I feel like what's working on the dating apps is it allows you to have more availability to more people. In the early stages of dating, it's
mm.
healthy to date multiple people at once, almost just like you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. Just like in business, you're talking to many different leads, not just one.
You are saying something that I echo to my friends, but I have some guys that are they're good guys. They're like, I just don't feel right dating more than one girl at a time. And I'm like, that's great,
Mhm,
but like I think you gotta hedge your bets a little bit here. You gotta have a
mhm.
diversified investment portfolio, my guy. I mean, you gotta keep a couple of irons in the fire.
I agree with you as unpopular as that is. And I feel like what's not working, this is my personal opinion for anxiously attached people, avoid having sex too early.
I think that's
Point blank
important.
period.
I mean, I think that's
Point blank
important too.
period. Yes, because with women and men, the differences with women and men there, women physiologically will attach and bond to a man if you're in a heterosexual relationship with sex. Men don't have that same physiological response in their brain like women do. So if you have sex with someone on the first date, this isn't coming from a place of shame, but just coming from a place of awareness, as it might cause you to attach prematurely because you don't really know them after one date or even a month. So if you're having sex a bit too early, this can cloud your judgment and this could cause you to ignore red flags. This is my personal opinion. So,
I think you're right. I think you're totally right. And there's this sort of idea that men will jump over however high the bar is to have sex. And generally, women are the ones who set the height of the bar. And in times past, not that long ago, 50, 60 years ago, you had to go to high school, you had to play sports, you had to be athletic, you had to go to college, you had to get, you had to be an accountant, you had to get a job, you had to be an upstanding member of society, you had to try to buy a house. You had to do all these things before a girl was like, yeah, that's a good guy, right? That's a good
mhm,
guy in our town. That's a guy
mhm,
that I would be willing to marry if potentially they were also interested in me. And now the bar has been lowered. It's no one's fault. It's just culture to like, hey, this is an attractive guy that I met at the bar on a Thursday night. And like I've had 4 or 5 drinks. So if
mhm,
you set the standard at that point, then guys do not need to do a lot to overcome it. And Valerie, to
mhm.
your point, I would say, and this is from a male perspective, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but if someone was to go out on a date and maybe the first date they have sex, it's just like, "Oh, well, that was kind of easy." Like that really wasn't a challenge for me. And I know this is going to sound bad, but there's this idea cat string theory. Does it mean anything to you, Valerie? I tell my friends
I
this all the time. I think we've read some Neil Strauss, so we're probably on the same wavelength with this. But if you hang a string out in front of a cat, they are so excited. They love it. They're going to go crazy. They're going to try to grab that. You can see these videos of cats jumping, all the way towards the ceiling. As soon as you take that string and you set it on the ground, that is not interesting to that cat anymore. They'll be boom, flip a switch. It's no longer interesting. And I think that from an attachment style on the male side of things, where they're anxious, this is the guy who like just is in love with the girl and will do everything for her. And he just can't understand like, why is Valerie not into me? And I'm like, dude, you're giving way too much. Like you are making
Mhm.
this not fun for her because there's no
Mhm.
chase involved in this. You have to
Mm.
allow a chase to happen. You have to, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but you have to be like sort of like, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm that interested. When you come on that strong, I know it sounds like a really cool thing that you would see in a rom-com, but I think rom-coms have really messed up our dating perception. If you come on
Mm.
that strong, that girl's gonna be like, "This is a low value person who is just gonna give
Mm.
everything to me. It's not fun in any way, shape, or
Mhm.
form. There's no chase involved."
Mhm. Okay, here I have so many thoughts on this. Here's my thoughts on this chase. I think someone who's securely attached, I believe that there really won't be a chase. They'll say, "Okay, I'm looking for this. Is this what you're looking for?" And just they go slowly. It's an upward thing where it's slow and steady wins the race. But I feel like if it's the avoidant attacher and anxious attacher, there will be that push and pull. The anxious
Mm,
wants to go towards like that man that you mentioned coming on too strong. The avoidant that triggers them. They feel like they're suffocated from it and they'll pull away. So
mm,
I feel like to your point, from my perception, my assumption of what you meant was just kind of like, well, you can't give everything out into the table. Like for my clients, especially 80% of them are women, I really tell them take it slow. Don't go to his house on the first date and spend the weekend. Slow and steady wins the race. Maybe the first date is going to a coffee shop. Second date, maybe you're going to a museum, spending an hour with them. First few dates, you're just getting to know them.
mhm.
So that's my thoughts. What are your thoughts on that?
I understand what you're saying about the push-pull of the 2 types of avoidance styles, and I know you can talk probably at length about this. That's where a lot of these toxic relationships emerge, right?
Mhm.
Where, as you said, you said the F boy, uh, where he's avoidant, right? And the girl is like, "Oh, but he's so cool," and because he is pulling away, they go in even harder and harder and harder, and that continues to push him farther away. They're like 2 magnets that are
Mhm.
repelling each other. You just can't
Mhm.
get them close together because there's that gap in between the
Mhm.
2 of them. But I would say this goes for both sexes actually. Like, guys, if you want a girl to like you, I would also not necessarily recommend like having sex on the first date because again,
Mhm.
you want to create sort of, this is my opinion, you want to create a sort of air of like, um, hey, I'm difficult to get. Like I'm not easy to get. Like I'm a prize. You have to work
Mhm.
to get me at some capacity. Again, if you just
Mhm.
kind of put it all out there, especially on date one, then I don't know how easy it is for them to say like, oh, well, there's some more out there that I need to learn about and figure out, and I need to, show them that I'm interesting. That's kind of the way that
Mhm.
I think about it on both ends of the spectrum.
Mhm. Absolutely. I completely agree. And yeah, those toxic relationships, they're really just emulating and replicating your childhood trauma ultimately.
Mm.
Like why toxic relationships are so addicting, or you might see one of your friends and be like, "Man, there was some asshole. Why are they still with them?" I hope it's okay that I'm swearing on your podcast.
You would not be the first swear.
Okay, fabulous. So it becomes intoxicating because with toxic relationships or avoidant relationships, they'll love bomb you. That this will be so intoxicating and like a drug to your nervous system if you've experienced neglect, if your parents were emotionally unavailable, because we are projecting our own unmet needs onto our partner. So if our partner is love bombing and feeding us all this love, feels like a drug to our nervous system. It feels intoxicating. But someone who maybe is avoidant, they'll pull away, and then that anxious attacher will try it's so hard to get it back, just like it did in childhood. And what happens is it's that intermittent reinforcement, just like with gambling. The same thing happens with toxic
Mm.
relationships. You're waiting for it to go back to the beginning. You're waiting to get that $1,000,000 slot machine because there's this little possibility that they'll be how they want you to be. But that's just in your potential. But it's in your potential in your mind. You're building up this potential. This isn't actual reality because it's triggering so much of your attachment trauma and your wounding, not feeling good enough. It comes down to this, oh, if I win this emotionally unavailable person, then that'll prove to me that I'm finally lovable and enough.
That's like the epitome of the rom-com, isn't it? It's like,
Yes, I absolutely hate rom-coms, to be honest, which a lot of people would find shocking, but once I experienced my first secure relationship, I was like, "Ugh, all of this just reminds me of, like, trauma bonding and toxic relationships, like, this is not a vibe for me." Like, all of these are so much of that push-pull, and it's so icky to me. Like, I actually just despise them, personally, unless they're funny.
yeah, the thing you were talking about, leads me to think of the guy who is like, he can't be tamed, he's just, cool and out there and doing his thing, but he meets this girl and she has to work for it, but she tames him and then boom, they live happily ever after. That's sort of exactly what you're describing, where you get that variable reward where finally I figured it out and now I've wowed them to the point that they want to marry me and now we go on and live happily ever after.
Mhm. You
While we're
got
on, while we're on the topic though, what's your favorite rom-com?
Uh, it's the one with Adam Sandler. I think it's like it's
The
about this.
one 50 First Dates?
Yes! That's what it's called. I
That's a
almost
good
said
one.
40 First Dates.
I think it's 50. You can fact check me on it. Mine's Hitch. I know Will
Okay.
Smith's a controversial guy right now, but that was a good one. That was pre-controversy. Will Smith was the epitome of like the avoidant guy in that. Like he was great at relationships, but he didn't need one, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
There you go.
What about things that aren't necessarily working with dating apps that you see maybe with your clients?
I feel like this kinda goes hand in hand with attachment styles is like, I'll just use some examples. Like, my friends have gone on dates recently, and they'll tell me, "Oh, like, they just they're not upfront." I ask men on the first date or even before we go on a date, "What are you looking for?" Because what are you looking for? And on
Feels like a
dating apps,
pretty reasonable vetting question.
yes,
I don't
and a
know
lot of
why I bring everything back to my business, but it's like if I was going to hire you, Valerie, and I told you the starting salary is 60 grand, but you're looking for 100, it's like there's no point in us doing this interview. Like I know I cannot
exactly.
get there for you.
Exactly, and that's why it's all about being upfront, but if you have those avoidant tendencies or if you're anxiously attached, you won't want to share that because you believe that it's not possible for you to find that person who's secure, find that healthy relationship. So, I feel like just what's wrong with it is you can opt out of saying if you want a long-term relationship or something casual. For me, when I was on the dating apps, I would just, like, X or swipe left on people who avoided putting that in their dating profile because
Mm,
I'm someone who I'm looking for a committed relationship. I'm a relationship gal. I'm not into this casual stuff. So because I have high self-worth and I wouldn't ever settle for crumbs. But that's because I've healed my anxious attachment.
mm. Well, I definitely wanna hear how you did that, but I would say from the male side, things that are working, you can definitely go on a lot of dates, and I don't wanna be this guy, but it doesn't take that much effort, to be honest. It depends on, I mean, you have to swipe, but if you max your swipes out, like, you're probably gonna get a couple dates. If you're, like, just decent average looking guy, like, just be fit, like, that's the only variable that you can control as a guy is, like, if you're just relatively fit. And there's a pretty low bar for fitness. It's like 2 out of every 3 people in the United States are overweight. So if you're just, like, not extremely overweight, you're probably going to be able to, like, swipe and get some dates. So I do think that is a beneficial thing. Whereas previously you had to be like funny. Like I said, you had to be funny. You had to know people. You had to be at the church softball league and do all these things. Now you can just sit on, the couch at your house and just swipe and potentially get dates. I mean,
Mhm,
it's not the worst thing in the world, but I would say from a male perspective, one of the things that's difficult is just one, it is definitely a lot harder for men to get dates. Like let's be clear. There's 3 to 1 female to males on dating app. Male to females, excuse me. 3 times as many males as females on the dating
mhm.
apps. And I've met girls and they'll be like, "I signed up for this app 3 days ago," and they'll show me their phone and they have like 200 matches. And I'm like, "Whoa." And some of my
Mhm.
friends are like, "I'll get 1 match a month." And I'm like,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, that's real from,
Mhm,
decent looking guys who got decent
mhm,
jobs too.
mhm.
So I understand that.
Yes, that's actually so funny because I was just gonna bring that up. A lot of my male friends and my brother, they're single, and they say that too. Like, it's so much harder for men to get dates than women.
It
And I feel
definitely
like
is. It definitely
yeah,
is.
yeah.
But there's a lot of ways to help your odds.
Mhm.
Let's say that. First and foremost, again, like I'm a big fitness person. Like I'm a proponent of
Yeah.
fitness, but nonetheless, like if you're just relatively fit, like again, you're going to be ahead of 60 to 70% of guys out there. Just put in a little bit more effort, like get a little bit better photos.
Mhm.
Um, my technique was always I just try to say something funny right away. Like I'm just like constantly like just funny, 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 be funny, be funny. That's what has always historically worked the best for
Yeah?
me. When I know you're probably you would be like this guy's not serious enough. But that's what I always just did is I just tried to make it like fun.
Mhm.
Try to be playful. That's kind of what I've always sort of seen is that girls like to feel like they're in a playful, fun environment. Girls wanna have fun on a date.
Mhm.
Guys wanna have
Mhm.
fun on a date. I wanna have fun on a
Yes.
date.
Me
But if you
too.
can start to build that on the app, I think that helps a lot. And
Mhm.
then, at some capacity, unfortunately, it is just volume, just like,
Mhm.
you know, commenting on people that you find attractive. Logan Uri, the Hinge data scientist, she's
Mhm.
the primary data scientist. She encourages you to try to date uh, the least attractive person that you still find attractive. So essentially, like the hidden gem, if you will,
Mm.
where you're like, no, this person's attractive to me. It's good enough for me. Maybe I understand why not everyone would find this person attractive, but they're attractive to me. So, I mean, that's another
Mhm.
thing to think about as a guy. If you're not getting matches, unfortunately, I know they go, oh, lower your standards. It's like, hey, you need to do both things. You need to make yourself better and potentially consider your standards also at the same time.
That is true. That is true. But yeah, a lot of people who are anxiously attached, they'll lower their standards and they don't realize it because they have this wound of not feeling chosen, not feeling good enough. So they'll try to just lower their standards because it's like to them, getting some attention is better than none. But Alex, I'd love to hear what's your go to move, your funny move on a dating app?
It varies. It depends on what they
Yeah.
say. Sometimes I'll just swipe no if I can't think of anything funny. I'm just like, I just don't have anything here, so I just move on. But no, I would just, whatever their picture is, I would just try to like poke fun at them. Some girls will like be like, "Oh, don't make fun of me," but I would say other people are into it. I would just try to make light of some situation or some picture or something that they said, and that has historically seemed to work better than just trying to like a photo or be, "Oh, you look pretty in this photo." Like
Uh-huh.
that does not seem to work at all. There's a lot of funny videos out there that you could watch where like girls and guys will swap and a girl will get like an averagely attractive guy's profile and they'll be like, "Get as many dates as you can in the next, whatever, 7 days or something." And these girls are saying like just the dumbest stuff that the guys reacting are like, "Oh, don't say that. No, that's never gonna work." And the girls are like, "I don't understand why I'm not getting any matches."
Totally. I think it's all about that. It's just about being lighthearted and funny and not being as hard as it sounds, just not being as attached to the outcome because it will
Yes.
happen when it should, when you're a match to that person. But you have to become a match to the healthy person.
Yes. I would say the downside of dating apps for guys is to that point, like when guys feel like they don't get any matches. And I think this is happening. The data flushes it out that many men are just like leaving the dating market altogether. They're just like, I'm not even going to try this. I'm sure girls are also in the same category, that they're like, I'm just going to focus on my own thing, or I'm just not even interested in being in the dating market. Um, and then there's also the hyper ability to be avoidant as a guy. If you're like,
Mhm.
hey, I like when we're doing the dates and date 3, date 4, date 10 is fun. But to your point, once you go, all right, so let's get serious. Like, let's talk about being in a relationship. Guys go, oh, well, geez, I could just keep swiping and I could maybe do, yeah, I don't like, what she does with her cat's litter box. That's weird to me. Like I'm just gonna avoid this situation and move on potentially.
Yeah, that's just the avoidant attachment.
Mm. Yeah, so those would be the bad things that I see, and there's some other, more um, esoteric things that I think happen on dating apps, like the idea that you've maybe heard this, that the most attractive guys get a disproportionate amount of matches.
Mhm,
So we have essentially fixated on men who are very attractive, and we've prioritized attractiveness, and whereas that is not how it always worked for women specifically, because again, you would meet this person and you have to realize, like, oh, Dave's actually really funny, and Bill's an accountant. I like accounting, and oh, I watched this person play softball, and he was actually really good, which was attractive to me. Now all you see is a picture. So the middle tier guys who had other things going for them aren't able to convey that necessarily as well, which
mhm,
kind of continues this cycle that the most attractive guys are getting a lot of matches, and it's very easy for them to be avoidant because they're like, I have a lot of matches. I can keep on doing this dating thing. But all the girls want that really attractive guy, not realizing that that guy has a lot of choices out there. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But even if someone is really attractive, it's like if someone is secure, they're gonna want to spend their time with one gal or man,
I
whatever
I
you
do
lean
think
towards.
I think there's a little bit of I do think that um I think your psychology can be changed relatively quickly with those experiences. Like,
Mhm,
so I found this was me. I found that as I got older, I had more success dating, which I think
mm,
now that I've thought about it, I'm like, okay, this makes a lot of sense.
mhm,
Because when you're 22, 23 years old, as a man, you have virtually no status at all. You have no money, right? You
Typically.
I lived with my parents. Legitimately, I lived with my parents when I graduated college, which, they
Mhm,
were great. They allowed me to come live with them. Um, I was starting to build a business, but it wasn't anything yet at this
mhm,
point in time. So,
mhm,
hypothetically, if you were a attractive 23, 24-year-old girl, like, well, why would you be interested in me instead of like the
mhm,
28-year-old guy who like
mhm,
already is a sales account executive and he's making $120,000 a year and he's got, a BMW and he's got his own
mhm,
place. Like that's really exciting. So
mhm,
now I kind of realize like, oh, like I'm a little bit older, I'm a little bit wiser, I've actually become a little bit more successful. Um,
mhm,
so people are a little more interested in me because I've
mhm,
actually done something with myself as opposed to like
mhm.
I'm potential out there into the future.
Yes, absolutely.
And
I think that's huge.
that's changed the way that I've dated for sure.
Mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm,
I mean, the way that Alex at 23 versus 32 dates is totally different. I have just a different set of criteria and things that I'm potentially looking for that would be, when I was 23, I would have been excited to get a date. Now I'm like, okay, well, I want to be a little more thoughtful about this.
Hmm. Yeah, tell me about how your criteria has shifted.
Well, I've just went on a lot of dates. I've just been in relationships that didn't work necessarily. So you kind of start to go, okay, that didn't work.
Mhm,
And you don't, I think, want to keep a hit list of all the things that didn't work, because then you might typecast someone out there who is potentially a good fit. But
mhm,
I've sort of just been able to understand more about myself, more about what works, more
mhm,
about what doesn't work. Like I said, those like very emotional type of people, they they have not seemed to mesh well with what I do and what I have. So I think
mhm,
that, not to say that I don't look for that, but I understand right away where that train might head.
mhm,
Um, just look for someone who's independent, who's done things for themselves,
mhm,
who has some amount of their own success, who can take care of themselves. I don't want to
mhm,
like take care of a person. I don't want to have to be there, every chirping, 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 chirping. Yeah, just I think of just a lot more mature, but a lot more nailed down on what I actually am looking for.
mhm. Fabulous, that's awesome. Yeah, I think Yeah, I think dating is just really interesting in this day and age, but I think there's so many ways that you can date in a way that is secure, that because anyone can find their match out there. There's 8 billion people on this planet.
There's a lot of people.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Talk to me about anxiety. I know that's a big area of focus for you. I would also
Mhm.
like to talk about how you feel like you've worked on your attachment style. Sounds like you had some issues, or at least you felt like you had some issues. Talk to me about
Mhm.
how you uh, feel like about anxiety, and talk about how people can help cure themselves of these various attachment styles.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just start with anxiety. I'll just share a little bit about my story. I used to struggle with chronic debilitating anxiety where I would have panic attacks once a week. I would really struggle with anxiety. Got to a point where, I was seeing a talk therapist for 4 years at that point, and nothing was changing. I still felt anxious around dating. I still felt anxious around just so many things in my life. I felt very out of control, and then it started to impact my health. I started to develop cystic acne.
Mm,
If you looked at my website, you saw my before and after. You could see my cystic acne. I also had adrenal fatigue. I also had chronic pain. It started with chronic headaches, then chronic neck pain, and then sooner rather than later, I felt like I was a 90-year-old in a
mm,
20-something-year-old's body, and it was horrible. It was not a fun way to live. And then I stumbled upon a hypnotherapist. It really helped me to move the needle forward on what is the actual root of how I acquired this anxiety, because every single baby is born secure and worthy. No one is born worried. It's a learned behavior to overthink and to worry in order to keep yourself safe. So if you have a parent or parents who are emotionally unavailable, you learn to feel anxious, to feel on edge, because you don't know which parent you're going to get that day. So for me, how I've really worked on my anxious attachment and my anxiety is learning how to process my emotions, feeling safer in my body. So I did hypnotherapy, really got to the root cause of where that anxiety was stemming from. I also did a lot of somatic work, working with the body, because we can talk about our issues all day long, talk about how frustrating the dating apps all day long, but what is it triggering inside you? And if you keep sharing the same thing over and over again, if we were to be able to talk through it, it would have been gone. The issue would have been gone by now. And when we're actually talking about an issue, we're actually re traumatizing ourselves or reliving a trauma if we're talking about it over and over again. And this is why so many people tell me day in and day out, I've worked with a coach, I've worked with a therapist, I've seen them for years and nothing's changed, because they're ignoring their body. Because, like I said earlier,
mm,
if we're in a fight or flight state, if we're anxious, our logical part of our brain literally shuts down. So you can tell yourself to be calm, to calm down. Okay, he's going to text me and when he comes back from work, it's not going to make a difference. So learning how to work with my body, learning how to process my emotions, and also regulating my nervous system, because we have 4 different states of the nervous system: flight, which is anxiety or OCD like symptoms; freeze, which is shut down, depressed; fawn, which is people pleasing and codependency; and then fight, which is anger. And each of these tools will respond differently depending on which state of the nervous system you're in. So if you're at a 10 out of 10 on anxiety, you're about to have a panic attack, you're about to flip your shit, Alex. The last thing you want to do is sit and meditate. Because
mm.
if a tiger's coming at you, that's the last thing your body wants to do. So I help clients build customized tool kits that are specific to their nervous system and what works best for them, because everyone is very different. What might work for me might be a little different for you. So I really cater it to my client and what works best for them.
Interesting. Have you heard or seen these videos of gazelles after they're chased by lions and they get away?
Yes, yes, and then they shake.
Yeah, they have to like release that excess energy and anxiety, even though they just literally were chased by something. They have to like get that energy out.
Mhm.
Talk to me about then how moving your body, like what does that look like fundamentally?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was going to be my next point. So with anxiety, if you're on a 7 to 10 level of anxiety, shaking it out, like literally shaking your body, It will help release a lot of that excess adrenaline, just like dancing as well,
Mm,
putting on a song. All of that trauma gets stuck in the body, gets stored in our tissues, in our muscles. That's where this chronic pain starts to happen. And so if we're in a freeze state, for example, with using when we're talking about movements, a client to me came to me today saying, I'm feeling so depressed. Freeze can really look like, feeling low mood, low energy, really a lot of shaming, negative voice inside your head that tells you you're not good enough. It's always going to be this way. You're a piece of shit. And a lot of that shame, we don't want to just tell ourselves I'm worthy, because we're not going to believe it when we're in that state. So first, changing your nervous system state. So doing really gentle, subtle movements. If we're really feeling frozen, really feeling paralyzed, not able to take action, really even starting with small movements like nodding our head up and down, side to side, maybe doing some hip circles, moving around, doing some cat cows, because when we're in a depressed state, our energy's at the bottom. But when we're in an anxious state, we're up here. We are at a 10 out of 10. We have so much energy. So with a depressed state, you want to gain energy. With a anxious state, you want to release that excess energy.
mm,
So with anxiety, it's shaking, it's dancing. I also recommend EFT tapping. I have specific EFT tapping recordings to help with emotions when you're feeling overwhelmed, when they're feeling too overwhelming, when you're feeling anxious, because when we're in that anxious state, we want to like get it out of our system. We feel like we have so much of it. So tapping kind of gives us that pathway to kind of release some of that energy.
what is EFT?
So EFT is basically a modality where you're tapping on different meridians and energy points in the body to release a lot of that energy and anxiety.
Interesting. It's kinda like a small self-massage, if you will.
Yes, absolutely.
Interesting. So that was, something interesting that you said about anxiety where you have essentially, like, too much energy.
Mhm,
Um, that's something that I feel like for folks who don't exercise, I know I'm sounding like the exercise, advocate here,
mhm,
but I just feel like people don't actually use their body. They don't ever
mhm,
drain their body down to
mhm,
like low levels so
mhm,
that anxiety can just build up. I mean, I don't know
mhm.
if you know this book by Robert Sapolsky, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers.
No, I don't.
It's a pretty famous one, but
Mhm,
sort of the thesis of it is that we're animals. We've always
mhm,
moved a lot. Like all animals
mhm,
move. And
mhm,
part of the reason why people get very stressed is because we're living in an environment now that is in most ways stress has been removed, whereas we have
mhm,
the hard wiring, we have the technology for
mhm,
people on the savannah where there were big cats and wild game that was extremely dangerous, or
mhm,
animals and insects that could kill you at any point in time, and you had to like actually elevate your stress during those situations or else you would pass away and die or be killed. And now we don't have those same stimuli. So it's sort of like a moving target where we go
mhm,
like, oh, like I have a flat tire, or I'm going to be late for work. I'm going to be 10 minutes late for work. So you like ramp up your stress to fight as if you are going against a big cat, when in
mhm,
reality, it's like your boss might make like one comment and that's it. You're going to move on, or no one's going to say anything. It's going to be forgotten. No one will ever remember this in, a year, 2 years, 10 years. So our hard wiring, our technology is built to be stressed out at little things and built to be anxious. The
mhm,
ancestors who weren't anxious, they got killed by those big cats because they went, oh, that
mhm,
rustling out in the forest, that's nothing. Don't worry about that. And it's like, whoops, sorry, big cat. So
mhm.
essentially, we've genetically passed down over and over and over again this anxiety internally over the little things that could be something in the future, but we don't necessarily know if they are or not.
Absolutely, because if you're standing on the edge of the cliff, if someone who's not anxious, they'll jump right off. But someone
Mm,
who's like, "Whoa, this is anxiety inducing. I'm going to die." That person, that's like you said, that's evolutionary speaking what kept us alive. And absolutely, I think exercise is so freaking imperative. Strength training, yoga, dancing, getting into the body, because now since COVID, Everyone is on our laptops. We work from home. I work from home. I have to make very intentional efforts to work out, to walk.
Mm,
And it's so imperative. If I'm not doing that, I'm not feeling as calm and regulated as I would like to feel, because
mm.
we are species that have been evolutionized to move.
Do you have any particular do you get a lot of people who are just like, "Oh, I just don't exercise. I'm anxious, but I don't
Yeah.
exercise."
Yeah. I definitely recommend them to do it. I mean, I'm not like a health practitioner, so I can't tell them. But obviously, if you have all this pent up energy, it's going to be useful to exercise. And even it doesn't even have to be big. It could be yoga, even 10 minutes, something. But I'm a really big advocate for strength training, yoga, and I'm on 2 dance teams. So I love to move my body.
Mm. So that's more of the like day-to-day thing, but you said just doing things like if you start to feel anxious, you shake it out, you do tapping. Are there other things that you do? Do you do breathing, breath control? Do you have a mantra? Are there things when you have an acute fit of anxiety you attempt to do?
Yes. So I have a processing emotions meditation. We, a lot of the times, will start to feel anxious because we're resisting the current emotion. It could be sadness, hurt, anger. And then because we're resisting it, it's getting stuck in our body and then we're feeling anxious. So, what I like to do is in this meditation, I give to clients, I use it myself. If I ever feel like the anxiety's at like a level, 5 to 8, where it's not too big, it's first identifying what sensations am I noticing, then identifying what emotions am I noticing. Where do I feel that in my body? I'm noticing pressure in my chest, noticing I'm sweating, I'm noticing tension in my shoulders. My shoulders want to go up really high,
Mhm.
all of these different things. So as you identify that, you're looking at it more from an objective lens. And then in the processing emotions meditation, there's also breath work in there. So either 4-7-8 breathing or 5-2-8. So that looks like inhale for 5, hold for 2, exhale for 8. As you do longer exhalations, this puts your body and nervous system into a parasympathetic state, aka a calm, regulated state. So that's something huge that I recommend for clients to do, especially if you're someone who's anxious. A lot of the time, our breathing gets impacted. So then we have less CO2 tolerance, we have less lung capacity. So then people who are anxious, they're hyperventilating more because they're not getting in that oxygen. So
Mhm.
doing breath work at least a few times a day, even for 2 minutes, that's going to help really regulate your nervous system. And you're going to feel less of that pressure in your chest, less anxiety, your heart rate's going to be lower, and you're going to feel a lot more calm. But going back to that meditation, it's the labeling sensations, emotions, the breath work. And then I also I have them imagine their younger version of themselves that is feeling this way. Okay, when was the first time you felt this anxiety? When I was 4. Okay, what does this little girl look like? What's their facial expression? What's their posture like? And then imagining that your higher adult self is going closer to them, comforting them, soothing this younger version of you,
Mm.
helping them process their emotions, because then you're becoming the securely attached parent that you needed back then. Now you're becoming the true adult self. You're becoming your support system. This
Mm.
makes you magnetic. This makes you secure in yourself. So that way you're not settling for breadcrumbs because you're not looking for an escape through another person.
Mm, that's interesting. You sort of have like your own self-soothing mechanism that you can talk
Mhm,
yourself through or think yourself through. Um,
mhm,
what about anything more esoteric? Diet, supplements,
mhm.
sauna, cold baths, sleep changes, things of those nature. Are those things that you talk with people about, or have you ever seen any of those make a significant impact?
Yes, let's start with diet. That's a huge, fabulous point, because diet, especially now, right? As we talk about evolution, us changing with our diet, now we have the standard Western American diet where we're not getting as much protein. We're getting all these saturated fats and carbs. All of this inflammation is impacting our brain. So I don't know if you know who Dr. Daniel Amen is, but he talks about don't eat foods unless they love you back.
Mm-hmm.
So with diet, like for me personally, I live an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, especially because I used to have chronic pain. This really helped with the chronic pain. because inflammation impacts your anxiety levels. It impacts if you're depressed, it impacts everything. And I just talked about this with a client the other day because she was saying she was only eating like 2 eggs a day and she was strength training. If you're a woman, you need to be eating at least 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal. Most people, especially women, are under eating. And when you're under eating and you're not getting enough fuel and you're not getting enough protein, your blood pressure drops and then your fight or flight response kicks on because evolutionary wise, if you're not eating enough, you're going to die. So your body and your nervous system doesn't know the difference between if you're on a diet or if you're in a famine.
It's telling you to ramp up. Come on, Valerie, we need something. Do something.
Absolutely. So diet is definitely number one. I'll just share like a personal example. I've been working with a health coach on really this anti-inflammatory approach. I did this cleanse where it was no gluten, dairy, sugar, or grains. And this is what worked for me. And if you have an eating disorder or are recovering from an eating disorder, you can skip past this. But for me, I have a healthy relationship with food. So now I was able to do that cleanse. And previously, before then, I would feel depressed a bit more, low mood, a lot of like lower energy. It was harder for me to do as many things. Now, after that cleanse, I haven't had a shutdown period or low mood in a long time. And it's literally because of diet. Like it makes a huge effing impact. I have way more energy. So that's my thoughts on diet. And I'll go into the other aspects you mentioned.
Well, I think what's interesting is there's a lot of gut-related issues in the United States, and I think the number one reason why Americans visit their doctor is for gut-related issues, specifically like irritable bowel syndrome, which is like it's like going up and to the right in the United States. And there's always been this understanding that you have a connection between your gut. It's your gut instinct, right? So I wonder if some of the anxiety could be gut dysbiosis for people. Just like you're eating whatever it is, gluten or just, it's funny because a lot of the grains in the United States can be gluten-free, but they can still be not the same wheat that has been grown historically, like in Italy. That's why when people go to Italy and they eat pasta, they're like, I can just eat this, but I don't feel like shit after. That's because literally the grains are not the same. So maybe there's a connection there between the foods that you're eating and then what's happening in your gut. You have more gut cells than you do human cells. So there's kind of a funny thing like, well, who's running the show really? So I have to imagine that the foods that you intake, not only that, your gut, but just if you're eating shit foods and you don't understand that you actually feel like shit, you're obviously not going to be able to handle a difficult situation. Like if you're eating, unfortunately, there's a guy here at our office, and he's got like he's young, but he's like having some health problems, and I just keep telling him like, dude, like you eat like chicken wings and Cheetos, like obviously things are not gonna work. You're not 19 anymore. You can't just eat whatever you want. And I wonder if that plays into people not being able to handle tough situations and regulate their anxiety.
Absolutely. Because if their blood pressure is low, they're going to feel very dysregulated. And like you said, in other countries like Italy, they don't spray their crops with glyphosate. And glyphosate is what triggers autoimmunity, celiac, and like gluten reactions in people. I'm personally sensitive to gluten, but I don't have celiac. And that's why. And so also, with the gut, there's literally a huge correlation with the gut brain connection. 80% of our serotonin doesn't come from our brain, it comes from our gut. And 80% of that, it's like, think about that. And with IBS, really what happens is a lot of people store trauma in their gut, in their stomach. And the solar plexus in that area, if we want to talk about energy centers or the solar plexus chakra, whatever you want to call it, that's your space for personal power and confidence. So a lot of the time I'll be working with clients on a trauma or a specific trigger. Where are you noticing that in your body? I'm noticing that in my solar plexus. I'm noticing that in my gut, because that's your place for personal power and confidence and self-esteem. And when you're eating, and if you're stressed, if you're in a fight or flight state, your digestion literally it shuts down. So that's really, in my opinion, where IBS is stemming from.
Here's another one that because you mentioned the gluten intolerance thing. Do you know about this folic acid and folate conversation that's happening now?
A little bit. I heard that, like, one of them is more important than the other, and we're being pushed a different narrative, especially
Well,
with pregnant women, I've heard.
Yes, there is a pregnant woman thing, where pregnant women are prescribed these vitamins because it's supposed to help the baby, but there's a significant amount of the population, I believe it's as high as like 1 in 5, that has this
Mhm.
MTHFR mutation. They call it the motherfucker mutation, where you are
Yes.
not able to convert folic acid and folate. So
Mhm,
whenever you go and grab like bread or a box of pasta and it says enriched, so you'll see enriched wheat flour. That means
mhm,
that it has been sprayed with. I'm not sure which one's which. It's either you convert folic acid and folate or the other way around, but they've been
mhm,
sprayed with this. And
mhm,
as stated previously, 1 in 5 people cannot convert this into folic acid, which is a necessary nutrient in the human
mhm,
body. So you're
mhm,
getting all these people who, instead of actually having the folic acid that they need, they're getting like overloaded with this unconvertible folate. So
mhm,
you can do a test. I did the test and I have 1 out of 2 mutations for the
mm.
MT.
THFR gene.
Yeah, I didn't wanna say it,
Yeah.
you got me on the cursing thing, but, yeah, so I have 1 of 2 mutations, so now if I go and I buy any sort of, like, carbohydrate, I just wanna go look and make sure that it doesn't have that, and then I can take a
Mhm,
supplement. I got a supplement over here, TMG, helps you
mhm,
convert that because you basically don't produce this enzyme that helps you convert it. You can take a supplement that helps you convert it. It's crazy, just simple stuff like that, that
mhm,
literally the federal government mandates that, like, these flowers be sprayed with this, and
mhm.
1 in 5 people can't do anything with it, and it's making their life significantly worse.
Absolutely, and there's a direct correlation, not trying to get too controversial, but I will. The MTHFR gene has been directly correlated to the development of autism and ADHD. I I have the symptoms for ADHD. In my opinion, I thought it was more like trauma based, but like many people in my family have autism or have ADHD. And my mom, I believe, definitely has it. I've also had DNA tests done, and I surprisingly do not have the MTHFR gene, but I
Mm,
do have a carb sensitivity. So
mm.
that's also interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of anecdotal stories about, like, kids who they test them and pre-test, they were just really acting up in school, and they were being
Mhm.
really, over the top and destructive, and then once they figure out, "Oh, like, it's because 'cause they're getting loaded with this folate,"
Yes.
then they can fix it, and the kids are, like, smooth sailing. So
Absolutely, absolutely. For me, when I had a more anti-inflammatory approach, my ADHD-like symptoms really went down, and I also believe I don't know if you do you know who Gabor Mate is?
I've heard the name. I don't know a lot.
Okay. Okay. Well, he's really big in addiction and ADHD. He's a doctor. He talks so much about trauma, but ultimately his theory, and I agree with it, and I've worked with clients on their ADHD, it's really a protective part to disassociate and distract yourself from whatever's going on around you. Usually it's chaos
Mm,
and unpredictability in your household and stress. So you'll do if you can't fight, if you can't run away, if you can't freeze or fawn, you'll tune out. So
mm,
that's really my beliefs and where ADHD comes from. Obviously, there's a diet component as well. Especially, there's a direct correlation between children who are eating red dye I think it's red dye number 40.
yeah,
They're
Red
going to have a
40.
higher correlation to ADHD and hyperactivity.
Yeah, Red 40 is banned in, like, every country
Yes.
except the it's funny because there's a box of cereal on top of our fridge here in the office, and I don't know who's eating it, but, like, the 4th ingredient's Red 40, and I'm like, "Mm, geez." There's so many things to look out for, it's difficult. What about supplements? Are there any supplements that people can take that help with anxiety? I'm sure it's not one size fits all, but have you seen anything actually work?
Yes, so there is a direct correlation between anxiety and if you're low on magnesium. I think if you live in America, it's pretty great to supplement with magnesium glycinate. That's specifically for relaxation, for mood stabilization, for sleep. If you have cramping in your body and just tense muscles, um, It's typically because you are deficient in magnesium. So I feel like that's a really big one. There are other supplements like GABA, ashwagandha. There's also, I think they call it rhodiola or
Yeah,
however you
rhodiola,
pronounce
yeah.
it. Yes. There's so many different supplements out there that can target anxiety. And if you also take like turmeric, these are all things that will lower your inflammation.
Mhm.
But my caveat is like those things can help, but if you're not processing your emotions and you don't feel safe in your body and you're surrounded by toxic, unhealthy people who shame you, then it's those supplements aren't going to do anything. So I think you need both the diet, supplements, and the trauma work, learning how to process your emotions and working through that anxiety.
What about taking it up a notch? What about, actual prescription level medication? Is that something you've seen ever be beneficial for people, or is it maybe sort of the opposite, that it doesn't have the desired effect?
So this is really controversial. I maybe it's controversial, maybe it's not. I have
Neither of us are
taken
doctors here, so no
Yeah,
don't
neither of us
worry.
are doctors. I also am not like I am not a psychiatrist, so this is just my pure experience, pure thoughts. So I think if you are doing all the right things and maybe you need that extra tool, like there's no shame in it. But for some people, it just doesn't work because they're not also dealing with the underlying symptoms of it. I think that people prescribe prescription medications and then they think that's it, that's the end, and they don't do anything else. That's
Mm,
where there's a problem. But if you're like, okay, maybe I'm taking this as needed because maybe you had surgery. Like for me, when I was 19, I had a surgery and I guess I'm really sensitive to anesthesia. So my oxygen levels really dropped. And
mm.
so for me, it like gave me panic attacks and I felt like I was like stuck in a panic attack for days and nothing really helped it. But also that was before I like addressed a lot of my trauma stuck emotions in the body. But for me, the thing that did help me was Ativan, which is a medication that really helps to take you out of fight or flight. But those are also they can be very addictive. And also, like any medication is going to cause some sort of side effect. You just have to analyze what's your like cost benefit analysis. Like, is
Mm.
it worth the benefits to you? I think, I'm never ever going to show anyone who takes medication. It doesn't work for me. And I've had lots of my clients that are on prescription medication and they're still anxious. So I think if those underlying things aren't addressed, it's always going to be a band aid, not a full root cause solution. And that's what I really focus on is getting to the root cause so that you're not so anxious in your body and anxious in your relationships.
Yeah, I've heard it said that there are no side effects, there are just, effects, and some of which you don't like and appreciate, so that's kinda medication for you, and I would say it
Mhm.
as you stated in your situation, it sounded like you had an off-ramp, but I think a lot of people go, "Okay, well, I'm gonna start taking this." "Okay, when are you not gonna take it? When are you gonna stop?" "Well,
Yes.
I don't know, I'm just gonna take it forever." "For forever?" Like,
Yes.
you're 30
Yes.
years old, you're gonna take this medication for the next 60 years? You really wanna be that person who's taking 14 medications, when they're 80 years old? It's like, this is kinda how it starts.
It is, and I think you just have to be careful and know the limits and know what works best for your body. Like, my grandfather is a pharmacist, and so he would pop pills like candy, not in an addictive sense, but anytime there's a symptom, I'll take a medication for it. And
Mm.
that's just suppressing the actual symptom, and then you're adding side effects on top of it. But that's just my perspective, that's my opinion. The benefits have to outweigh the costs, but that should never be your one-stop shop. If you're having anxiety, it's for a reason.
Yeah, and I think you said it was your grandfather?
Mhm,
I
mhm,
think this is like how my dad is. He
mm.
is of a generation that they got so excited that they felt as if one thing could just cure them, fix them,
Yep,
that
yep.
it's like, "Okay, I could just take a pill and boom, my cholesterol's like, I don't have to worry about it anymore," instead of all of the other things that more holistically might go into that. So they were sort of
Mhm,
sort of sold a dream that didn't ever come to fruition, which
mhm,
was, "We can fix this. We can do this right now. You don't need to
mhm,
make any changes. All you need to do is follow us and we'll fix it." Whereas I think you and I would say, like, okay, well, if this is a temporary stopgap, great, but I need to be the one that does this. I've heard it said, rarely the things we do for our body are as good as the things we do to our body. So essentially, like,
Totally.
I need to go out and exercise instead of take a pill. I need to do that for my body.
Yeah, because your body is always sending you signals all the time. So if you're having high cholesterol, when did it start? What's causing that in the first place?
Yeah. Valerie, we're getting towards the end here, but I have a question. You did a whole episode around anxiety surrounding success, being successful.
Mhm, mhm.
So, what did you learn about people's anxiousness around success?
Absolutely. So going back to what we said earlier about, well, I guess we didn't talk about this. I think I'm thinking about my other podcast, but we ultimately, when we've grown up with parents who are emotionally unavailable, or success wasn't our norm, or we were even shamed for our success, will
Mm,
now have a fear of success because it's also not coinciding with our self-image. If we believe that we're a piece of shit, and if we believe that we're not worthy of success, anything that comes to that level of success and what we can have more, our body is going to self-sabotage because it's not going to feel safe with success. Or we might have beliefs that, when I get success, people aren't going to like me, my friends are going to leave me, people are going to think that I'm greedy, or there's so many beliefs that people have around money, that money's the root of
mm,
all evil. And if it's like, oh, then if I believe that, then I'll start to believe that I'm a bad person.
yeah.
If
Right behind me, it says, if you secretly despise wealth, it will evade you.
Absolutely, that is 100% it. And you can't just think your way out of it. You really have to unravel where these beliefs are coming from and work through these traumas in the body. Like, for example, a client of mine, she was conditioned that her mom literally was jealous of any success that she had. She would talk badly about her daughter and she would be mean to her all the time and shame her for success. And people would, like, literally, she went back to a scene when she was in kindergarten and her sister taught her how to read way quicker than everyone else. So
Mm,
she was looked at as an outsider for being smarter. And then she took that belief in her business and
mm,
she was 30 at this point. And then now as she unraveled this belief, she's been able to literally go from 5K months to 20K consistent months, putting herself out there. And so it's like, where are these beliefs stemming from? Healing them so that way we can have the success that we want. I'm
yeah.
so passionate about that as well.
No, I mean, thank you for that. Yeah, they even have a name for it. It's the tall poppy syndrome, right? Where the
Mm.
tall poppy gets noticed and cut off. And I think a lot of
Hmm.
people, maybe when they were kids, and I think that, this is more common potentially for women, where if you stand out, like you get unnecessary attention, or maybe not unnecessary, but unwanted attention,
Hmm.
that girls will be potentially a little more, I don't know what the word to say here is,
Mean.
catty, mean.
Yeah.
You go ahead. Yes. She said it, not me. That they will be like, "Ooh, like, oh, I got an A on the test. Yeah, I don't know. That was weird, And it's like, well, I tried really hard to get that, but I downplay my accomplishment. Whereas guys are sort of the opposite. Like they got a B plus and they're like bragging to their friends about it because
Hmm.
they're trying to step up in status, and women are sort of nervous to do that and
Hmm.
outshine other women because the intersexual competition is always far more, excuse me, the intrasexual competition is always far more intense than intersexual. So people talk about like, oh, it's guys versus girls, but people would counter and say, well, you should see like what girls will do to each other, what guys will do to each other, because it's way more intense, way more like undercutting and things like that.
Absolutely, Alex. I completely agree with you. I also think it's like the competition is ourselves. Like, can you get beyond your self-sabotaging patterns? Can you get beyond your limiting beliefs? Can you get beyond your childhood trauma that tells you that you're not enough?
hmm And there's a lot of imposter syndrome too, where you feel like, well, why do I deserve to be this person who says this thing?
Mhm,
Well, this person out there is far smarter than me. Like, why don't they do the podcast and tell people how to do business? And
mhm,
it takes a certain amount of confidence, sometimes overconfidence, to go
mhm,
like, well, I know enough about this topic. I need to start the podcast. I need to talk about it. I need to post it on social media. I need to tell my friends. I need to explain it to other people instead of
mhm,
going, I'm not worthy of talking about this. Like, let someone else go out and do it.
mhm. Absolutely. And that self-confidence, that confidence is instilled in you between 0 to 7 years old. That's where all our beliefs are formed. So a lot of it is from childhood, but also like the rise of social media as well. People can naturally compare and, oh, if Susie's doing it, why can I do it? But it's like, if you are called to do something, do it. You don't know what you're capable of until you actually start it and do the thing.
I've
And you
met a lot.
build confidence by doing something.
I've met a lot of really incompetent, successful business owners. You'd be shocked at how many people out there are just like not very smart, not very organized, not very good at what they do, and having a lot of success. And you're just like, where did this come from? How did this work?
Mhm.
Uh, Valerie, my last question, because we talked about it a lot, but if you were giving advice to a parent or a newly expecting parent, you said those 0 to 7 years are extremely important. Sounds like there's a lot of wrong things to do. What are the right things to do to give your child the best chance of having an emotionally supportive childhood and a successful adulthood?
Fabulous question. Building them up, and especially if you have a daughter, not praising them just for their looks, praising them for their effort. Oh my God, you tried so hard. I'm so proud of you. And it's just like really building them up, talking to them like you would your best friend. And if parents aren't doing that, if they're coming at a place of shame, they're just projecting their own internalized shame onto you. Some right things to do is to just praise your child for the things that they are doing, praising them for their effort, telling them that they are enough, they are worthy as they are,
Mm,
proving to them that they don't need to do anything to be loved because you love them no matter what. Encouraging them to go after their dreams, no matter if that's going to clown college or running a business, whatever they want to do, encourage it. Encourage their fluidity, encourage their creativity, encourage the things that bring them joy, and help them process their emotions, because a lot of people say babies self-regulate. They absolutely do not. Have you ever
mm,
seen a baby who wants to be with their mom? They're screaming their effing head off. Children literally don't, they can't regulate their emotions. So if you making sure you can process your own emotions and teaching them how to do that, because no one knows how to do it. We have to teach them how to do it. And if your nervous system is regulated, so will theirs. Like between 0 to 6 months of age, a baby literally doesn't understand that they are a separate human than you. So whatever you're feeling, whatever you feel, your baby will feel. Whatever you feel, your child will feel. And I think all of us can resonate with, if we had a parent who was in a bad mood, we can feel that energy and start to feel icky and start to just feel a little bit of that, especially if you're someone who describes yourself as a highly empathic or highly sensitive person.
mm. Isn't that part of the work of the doctor that you referenced, Dr. Gabor, that he's all about like holding your baby and not like restricting holding your child, kind of showing
Yes.
them that love, especially at a young age?
Yes, absolutely. With Gabor Mate, he talked about like his mom like literally gave him up when he was 6 months old to a
Mm,
stranger because she thought he was gonna die.
that's right. A
Um,
war-torn situation.
yeah, and it's just like the baby doesn't understand why it's being separated from its mother. In so many different countries, women wear their baby all the time, but in
Mhm,
America, they tell them the baby needs to be independent. Babies do not know how to self-soothe. Okay,
mm.
they can't regulate themselves. You have to help them.
Right, and a lot of there was, like, also a wave of let the baby cry it out, like, just let them cry until they stop crying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that literally creates attachment trauma and fear of abandonment.
it seems logical. I mean, I don't know. I don't have any kids, so I've never been a parent. It's always easier to hypothesize about how you would parent when you aren't one yet. But,
Yeah, yeah, like same with me. I'm also not a parent, but this is just all the science I've learned on attachment and just working with clients ultimately.
hmm. Valerie, is there anything you wanna cover that you don't think we hammered out? We got a lot of attachment, relationships, best ways to self-soothe, practices for individuals.
I do have one, well, I guess I have one thing that I thought of, but I guess we talked about it a little bit of like try to avoid sex on the first date. But a lot of people who have me on podcasts also ask me, when is it too early to have sex? And this is my advice. This is probably unpopular, but if you are emotionally unavailable, you will notice someone who's a narcissist, they'll love bomb you, or someone who's avoidant, they'll love bomb you and they'll have this mask more that they're secure and that they care for you, and they'll love bomb you, all these things. But then their mask will slip after the 3-month mark, and they will start to show their true self.
Mm.
So, if you can, avoid having sex until you are officially committed with someone or that 3-month mark, because if they're still kind, caring, compassionate after that 3-month mark, you know, that's a good sign.
3 months sounds like a long time, but
Yeah.
again, this is the new era where our parents probably would have waited. Well, my parents probably would have waited until they got married. Like they'd date for
Mhm.
5 years and be like, "Okay, it's wedding night. We're gonna have sex." So
Mhm.
it's not that crazy to wait 3 months and or as you stated until you're a committed relationship. My advice would just be until you legitimately care about this person and could envision
Mhm.
yourself like marrying them. Like, if you're
Absolutely.
like, "I could legitimately see myself." Will I? I don't know, but could I? Yeah, I could see it happening. I think that's maybe on my end, a good standard to hold.
Mhm. I think that's a really great standard as well. I definitely resonate with that.
Well, Valerie, where can people find you and check out some of the work that you do?
Absolutely. So, what I talked about with that meditation, that freebie, that's a freebie in the link in my bio on my Instagram at Heal with Val. My podcast is the Anxiety Recovery Podcast by Valerie Rubin on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere where you get podcasts, as well as my Facebook is Valerie Rubin, Rubin. And then, yeah,
Awesome, Valerie. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
yeah. Thank you so, so much, Alex. It was so great being
Appreciate
on.
appreciate it.